6 withdrawals. 6 cracks in the system. By June 15th, the Berlin Open was no longer just a tournament. It was a stress test for modern tennis. And then Donna Vekic broke the silence. Berlin, Germany. June 15th, 2026. 6:42 p.m. local time. No press room. No interview booth. No carefully staged media availability. Just a statement. But unlike the first one, the withdrawal notice that quietly removed her from the draw, this one was not quiet at all. It landed like a grenade. I was not injured enough to be protected, Vekic wrote. But I was not healthy enough to be safe. The tennis world froze. Because that line alone implied something far bigger than fatigue. It implied inconsistency in protection protocols. It implied pressure from scheduling expectations. And most dangerously for the sport's governing structure, it implied that players were being left to decide their own limits in a system that demanded they ignore them. She continued, I respect the WTA. I respect the tournaments. But there is a difference between opportunity and exhaustion disguised as opportunity. Within minutes, the statement had been reposted thousands of times. Within an hour, it was the only thing anyone in tennis was talking about. And then came the sentence that changed everything. I did not withdraw from Berlin because I didn't want to play Alex Eala. I withdrew because I was already playing the sport at the edge of what my body can handle. Anyone pretending otherwise is ignoring reality. That single name, Alex Eala, shifted the entire narrative. Not because Vekic blamed her, but because her withdrawal, intended as a personal decision about recovery, had now been dragged into a broader structural debate. Fairness of scheduling. Fairness of recovery windows. Fairness of expectation. Suddenly, Eala was no longer just advancing by a walkover. She was advancing through a storm she had not created. The WTA responded within hours. A brief statement. Carefully worded. Emotionally neutral. We are aware of Donna Vekic's comments and will review player workload policies in accordance with existing guidelines. Fans were not satisfied. Players were divided. And analysts were sharpening their arguments on both sides. Some called Vekic brave. Others called it disruptive. But no one could ignore it. Because it forced an uncomfortable question into the spotlight. How many players were one match away from breaking before someone admitted the system was too heavy? Meanwhile, in Berlin, Alex Eala prepared for her next match in near silence. No court session that day. No media spotlight. Just recovery, focus, and awareness that her name was now attached to something much larger than tennis results. When asked about Vekic's statement, she chose her words carefully. I hope she's okay, Eala said. That's all I can say. But behind the scenes, insiders described a tournament shifting in tone. Less celebration, more tension, less narrative about dominance, more questions about sustainability. And yet, the draw continued. Because tennis, unlike the conversation surrounding it, does not stop. And somewhere inside that contradiction, between performance and pressure, between spectacle and strain, Berlin had become something unexpected. Not just a tournament, but a mirror. And Alex Eala, whether she wanted it or not, was standing directly in front of everything at Queen's Club. She deserved to rest. The WTA should have given her more time. This is not on her. The sentiment spread fast. Too fast for the governing body to ignore. But they didn't respond. Not immediately. Not clearly. And in professional tennis, silence is never neutral. It becomes interpretation. It becomes fuel. It becomes controversy. Berlin, Germany. June 15th, 2026. Evening cycle. By the time Donna Vekic's full statement circulated through official media channels, the sport was already in full reaction mode. And it was no longer about one withdrawal. It was about what that withdrawal represented. I am not the only player feeling this, Vekic wrote. That should worry everyone. That line hit harder than anything else. Because it reframed the entire conversation. Not as an isolated complaint, but as a shared condition. A systemic pattern. Players began speaking more openly than they had in years. Some on record. Some anonymously. One top 20 player told a European outlet, "We all manage pain." The question is how long we're expected to pretend it doesn't exist. Another said simply, "It's not the matches that break you. It's the schedule between them." Meanwhile, the WTA's official response remained unchanged. A brief statement, acknowledging the comments, promising review, no timeline, no detail, no reassurance. And in that vacuum, interpretation filled the gap. Fans were divided. Some defended the tour structure. Others demanded reform. But the most striking shift was not in the arguments. It was in the tone. Something had changed in how the sport talked about itself. And at the center of it all, unintentionally, stood Alex Eala. Not as the cause, but as the context. The player who had advanced via walkover now found her match results attached to a debate she never started. At her second-round press availability, she was asked again about Vekic. She paused longer this time. "I don't think it's my place to comment on the system," she said carefully. "But I do think players should be heard." Then she added quietly, "We all want to compete. That's why we're here." It was the most neutral answer she could give. But it landed in a sport already leaning toward tension. Because now Berlin was no longer just about tennis matches. It was about what happens before players step on court. And what happens when they can't. And as the second round approached, with Elena Rybakina waiting in the draw and Wimbledon points hanging over everything, one truth was becoming unavoidable. Berlin had stopped being a tournament story. It had become a structural one. And in stories like that, there are no quiet rounds left. Player welfare should always come first. Donna Vekic's statement is a wake-up call. The WTA must do better, Billie Jean King added. But despite the growing chorus of support from legends, the governing body's response remained unchanged. "We are committed to player welfare and continuously reviewing the tour calendar," a WTA spokesperson said. A statement that said everything and nothing. No concrete changes. No timeline. No acknowledgement of urgency. Just the familiar language of institutions under pressure. And the players noticed. Berlin, Germany. June 16, 2026. Morning after. The walkover still lingered over the tournament. Not as controversy anymore, but as atmosphere. For Alex Eala, the feeling was complicated. She had advanced, but not in the way she wanted. "I was ready to play," she told reporters after practice. "I came here to compete. But I respect Donna's decision. Health has to come first. I wish her a fast recovery." It was the correct answer. Measured. Professional. Safe. But those who watched her closely noticed what lay beneath it. Disappointment. Restlessness. A competitor denied her rhythm. A player who builds identity through battle now temporarily, without one. Still, there was an undeniable upside. She was fresh, rested, and waiting for Elena Rybakina, the world number 2, the Wimbledon champion, a player who had beaten her just weeks earlier in Rome. The contrast was sharp. Rybakina arrived with power, precision, and pedigree. Eala arrived with something less measurable: momentum, belief, and adaptation. "I know I can compete with the best," she said quietly. "I've beaten top players before. I know what I'm capable of." There was no arrogance in it. Only certainty earned through repetition. Through survival. Through matches that should have broken her, but didn't. Berlin now stood at a turning point. Not just for one player, but for the entire narrative of the grass season. Because what came next wasn't a subplot anymore. It was the main event. Alex Eala versus Elena Rybakina. Youth versus power. Momentum versus reputation. The challenger versus the champion who is not supposed to be challenged. And somewhere in the middle of all the headlines, the walkover, the controversy, and the statements, tennis was still waiting to be decided on court. Laban always. And the next match was already waiting.